Can you say something about yourself and your profession?
Sure. My name is Philip Calvert. I live here in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and I'm the National Director of Development for International Justice Mission Canada. So International Justice Mission Canada is part of a larger organization called International Justice Mission, which has offices around the world and over 1,000 staff globally. The mission, or the purpose why we exist, is to, we have a goal by 2030, which is to rescue millions of people from slavery, protect 500 million people from ever being affected by slavery and violence in the first place, and to make justice for the poor unstoppable. And so the way that we go about doing that is working in partnership and collaboration with local law enforcement and justice systems broadly throughout our project area offices that we work. So there's 21 of those around the world. Most of them are located within 4 regions. So South Asia, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and then Africa and Europe. And we work in collaboration with those justice systems in order to prove a theory of change, which is what my talk was about. So this theory of change is the idea that if you replace impunity with accountability for crime, then you can see violence reduced dramatically, and specifically in what we call casework areas. So those casework areas would be in South Asia, for example. We focus heavily on bonded labor slavery and kind of slavery or human trafficking generally around the world, as well as violence against women and children. So like intimate partner violence, sexual assault cases, those kinds of things. And then specifically in Kenya, we work on police abuse of power cases, and lots of, like in Romania, as well as in Thailand and Cambodia, we focus on cross-border trafficking issues. And yeah, that's kind of broadly speaking, that's our big thing, is that we work within those justice systems in order to build stronger laws, but also stronger enforcement, better training for frontline police officers, as well as better processes within court systems in order to actually see convictions of trials happening in a timely manner, and all of that being victim-centered, so as to not re-traumatize victims in the first place. But then we also work with partners in each of these areas to make sure that aftercare, so once somebody's rescued, the aftercare itself is meets a certain kind of minimum standard of care for the victims itself. And so, I mean, that looks different kind of in jurisdictions around the world, but it's working with perhaps like a government shelter, could be other NGOs, basically anybody that's concerned about the care of victims post-rescue. So.
Okay, and what's the source of slavery in the modern world?
Yeah, it's a great question. The sources of slavery really boils down to this idea of impunity. So if you have a criminal that feels that they are more powerful and can use their influence in a community in order to maybe make some more money, or just have no fear of being caught for their crimes, then they'll do it. And so we see slavery in operations like rice mills, brick kilns, rock quarries, wood cutting units, all of those kinds of things. Basically anything that requires labor. That if there's an opportunity for somebody to take advantage of, like in South Asia, for example, a lower caste, then they'll go ahead and do that because there's no concern about them ever being held accountable for that crime, and so their profit margin goes through the roof because they don't have to worry about paying anybody. Likewise, we see another form of slavery being commercial sexual exploitation of children, or like brothel-based sex trafficking. And so again, it's people that have nefarious intent that want to commodify somebody in order to make money. If there's no fear of being caught or prosecuted for those crimes, then they'll do it. we've seen those kinds of things throughout the Philippines, in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bolivia, all over the place. And then kind of another form of sex trafficking that we've noticed come up a lot in recent years, and really been exacerbated this year because of kind of this idea of a couch economy, because of people being in lockdown and working from home and everything, is called cyber sex trafficking. And so cyber sex trafficking, kind of the epicenter of that currently is in the Philippines. And so basically it's people that, so on the source side, you have children that are trapped in a lock-in situation with sometimes, unfortunately, the majority of the time, it's a caregiver. Could be like a mother or a grandparent or a trusted friend that is in somehow through tech platforms, actually, in touch with someone on the demand side, right? So demand side being like the developed kind of group of countries or wealthier countries that want to are able to pay money through, again, another tech platform, money transfer type of thing, in order to receive services. So what that looks like is the perpetrator on the source side, being the grandmother or mother, whatever that case is, basically has this commodity of their child that they sell, either the likeness of, an image of, a live streamed video of some kind of sexual assault. It could be with another child, could be with an adult, could be with an object. And then the person on the demand side is paying in order for the sometimes just the images or the videos, but sometimes they're also paying for the ability to live stream the type of abuse that they want to see. And so it's a distinctly dark kind of corner of the modern slavery world. So the Philippines currently is the epicenter of that, but we're noticing that because of COVID and everything that's happened this year, that kind of one central place is becoming more of, we're seeing it pop up in more and more places.
So is it possible to say that the criminals or people who are doing this slavery use the new technologies?
Yeah.
And do you also use new technologies to fight the slavery?
Yeah. So we have so we backtrack a little bit. We have 4 kind of core capacities that we have in all of our field offices, as we call them. So number 1 is investigations. So sometimes that looks like in brothel-based trafficking, for example, that looks like people are investigators who pose as people that are looking for sex with a minor and build a relationship with a brothel owner in order to kind of gain access to the younger kids in the back type of idea. And then just kind of build case files from there and then bring that to the local police in order to actually do a rescue operation. In a cyber sex trafficking office, that is slightly different in that we have people online that are looking to kind of lure these perpetrators that are looking to sell these kids online, and then work in collaboration again with local law enforcement to do that. So that's an example of using kind of technology there. Another example is on the investigation side is working with satellite imagery providers, specifically in cross-border trafficking cases, of looking at things like the shipping routes of boats that are known to be trafficking boats off the south coast of Thailand. And there's different patterns that we've been able to identify where boats will follow different ways or know how to get around certain law enforcement agencies on the ground. And so we're working in collaboration with multiple law enforcement agencies around the world using satellite data imagery in order to identify the boats that would most likely be holding victims of slavery. Another thing is using kind of community-based data and creating access to systems that local law enforcement can have in order to identify, where where are the pockets where we can likely see that either a brothel is located, or based off of all kinds of different metrics, where we're likely to see a spike in sexual assault cases, for example. Those types of things are all stuff that we work with different tech providers in order to create kind of creative solutions for problems. So that's one core capacity is investigations. Second one is aftercare. So that's, again, working to make sure there's minimum standards of care for victims once they've been rescued. Number three is the actual judicial arm of a justice system. So like judges, magistrates, all those kinds of things. In this year, we've seen a high degree of technology being used there, of just being able to facilitate virtual courtrooms, virtual hearings. Historically, we've been able to work with emerging technology around having the ability to collect the actual testimony of victims in a way that's seen as passable in the court, but does not require the victim to actually be in the courtroom physically. So whether that's a live stream or pre-recorded something that has a end-to-end encryption to make sure that it's safe, that kind of thing. And then the fourth one is community mobilization. And so we work with, in some countries it's churches, in some countries it's just kind of local community groups of kind of creating content in order for people in country to understand some of the issues. So sometimes it's hard to see the problems of your own country when you're too close to it. And so, for example, in Guatemala, we've worked with a couple of different agencies to create some awareness commercials and videos in order to spread out into the community, in order to help people understand how widespread domestic abuse is throughout the country. We've done the same thing in South Asia around bonded labor slavery, of helping people to understand that, when you drive by a brick kiln, things may not look as they appear, and just kind of raising awareness on that front. So really in all kind of four areas, there's opportunity for innovation and technology to be a part of the solution.
Okay. And do you have some community, or do you do something in Poland?
Not in Poland, no, unfortunately.
Okay, but in United European, yes, because you told us that you do something, you take some action in Romania, yes?
Yeah. So Romania is our newest office. And so that's focusing on cross-border trafficking issues. And so that operation is just getting kind of going. But then we also have an office similar to IJM Canada, so that works largely on fundraising and awareness in the UK, in the Netherlands, and in Germany.
Okay. And do you think about, having office in Poland? No.
That's a question above my decision-making ability. So,
okay.
I'm not sure where that sits at this point. Okay.
And did you, in your work, hear about cryptocurrency? Did these people who are doing slavery, did they use the cryptocurrency?
Yeah, like blockchain more broadly is a super fascinating field in kind of the whole world of slavery and rights, right? So one of the things that we work on in Uganda, for example, is around widows that have their property stolen from them, because it can be very hard to prove the actual line of ownership through deeds, because sometimes a bribe might be required in order to even access the file, which is held at the government office. But something like blockchain could be an extraordinarily beneficial innovation in that space specifically, because it removes the need for potentially a corrupt official to receive a bribe, right? Because it's just in the ledger. So that's a great example of that, of how there could be a potential opportunity for blockchain to be a solution to a problem. Cryptocurrencies, could also there's positives and there's negatives to it, right? Like anything. In terms of like the actual finding payment or finding the transfer of funds for something like cyber sex trafficking. Theoretically, that could be happening in the cryptocurrency world. For the most part, what we find anyway is that just things like Facebook are kind of the level of sophistication that a lot of that transfer happens on, which is mind-boggling, which just undermines the idea, underlines the idea of impunity, that people have like literally no fear. Like I can do it on Facebook and have no fear of being caught, right? And so like that's kind of the level that we're currently working at. And there's so much there just at that surface level that you don't even have to necessarily dig into the layers of, the dark web or cryptocurrencies or anything like that. Although I'm sure it's happening there. Just the level of arrogance that exists on that impunity side is so surface level that there's so much work to do just even there.
So the most important thing that I think is to fight the slavery from your presentation is to talk about this problem. Yes.
Yeah. So like there's many things. Number one, awareness. If you don't know what you're fighting, how can you even fight it, right? So just being aware of the fact that there's 40.3 million people currently enslaved around the world is a massive thing. From that 40.3 million people, estimates say that there's roughly $150 billion worth of illegal activity generated from that. And so like we're talking bigger than the biggest tech companies in the world of their annual earnings, right? Like this is massive. And then, so like if we even understand scale, then we can start looking at, okay, so what are the holes that exist which allow for those things to happen, right? So like, yes, we would love to get to a point where we can dig into cryptocurrencies and blockchain and the dark web and all that kind of stuff. But so much of it is so hidden in plain sight at this point just because people aren't even talking about it, period. So education is a huge part of it. Typically, I would say there's kind of 3 stages for anybody to get involved. Number one is encounter. So hearing a talk or watching a video or whatever it is that kind of opens that rabbit hole. Number 2 is to explore. So it's exploring in terms of what are the areas that it exists, but then also more importantly is what is the areas that I can have a difference in this fight. And then number 3 is engage. So once I do that kind of inventory finding of seeing what the problems are as well as the solutions that I can bring to the table, then engagement comes out of that. What happens a lot, unfortunately, is that people get they kind of have that first encounter and then go directly to engagement, which is almost a surefire formula for burnout. Because if you don't take the time to understand the specific problems and how an individual can have a difference in the fight, it becomes overwhelming too fast. And then all of a sudden you're just angry and compassion fatigue and all those things settle in, and then ultimately it has very limited impact. So I would say that number 1 is education. Number 2 is figuring out specifically what are the things that I can bring to this fight so that I can do it for a long period of time, because that's where it really lies. Like with iJam's work, for example, it takes years and decades in order to have a difference in a specific area, because it takes a long time to overcome like corruption that could be within the local justice system, for example. And so if you're not willing to be in it for the long haul, through understanding what your specific skill sets and abilities could do for the bigger kind of problem, then, it ultimately could be a very demoralizing experience.
Oh, it's very interesting. And to be honest, I never were thinking that the slavery is so big problem for us now. Maybe because living in United European gives you some, I don't know, thinking that it's not our problem, but
right.
Now I see it's a big problem for all of us. So I hope that the people who are hearing us will start thinking about this. Once again, thank you for interview, and it was very interesting.
Yeah, if I could say two things in terms of the engagement. Number one is become aware of supply chains is a big area. So first, like, to use my context in Canada, we're one of the only countries in the world that has absolutely zero laws around transparency of supply chains. So it's next to impossible in Canada to know if I go and buy a shirt if it's tainted with slavery, because companies aren't required to disclose any of that. The UK, and by extension the European Union, has much better laws around that. And so taking the time to look into that, I would encourage people to do that, to be an informed consumer, because demand from consumers will inform how companies operate. And so if there's wide adoption of saying that I refuse to buy this shirt because it's potentially tainted with slavery, if that conversation changes, then it'll force companies to be more responsible around that area. So that's one thing. The second thing, what was I going to say? The people can do their own thing too. So I'm wearing this shirt today. It says Freedom 8848 on it. It's a group that here in Calgary that made the decision that kind of after having that first encounter, and they did some exploring and realized that they're outdoor enthusiasts, and so their form of engagement was over the summer, or actually over 3 days. They climbed 9 mountain peaks in the Rocky Mountains in order to be the equivalent, which is 8848, is the meters above sea level that Mount Everest is. And so in 3 days, they climbed the elevation of Mount Everest locally here in order to raise awareness and some funds specifically for IJM and a few other things. And so that's an example of, that kind of idea of, what do I have in my hands, right? Is it being an outdoor enthusiast? Is it being a tech startup company? Is it being politically active? Whatever the case is, there's room for anybody once you get creative, figuring out how to get towards that engagement, which leads to solutions.
Okay, so if I'm drinking coffee, I should always check it's fair trade.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a great example.